I wanted to tell you about their suggested topics. Before I do that, I want to talk about this. This is a silhouette that I did. I went to the free art that you can find online, and I did a silhouette. And originally, it didn't have these long eyelashes, but when I was cutting it, I left the eyelashes, and I kind of left the back a little different, so that the back of her head, this is supposed to be Jane Austen, and the eyelashes are different. So they criticized that because they didn't realize that you're allowed to use free art from online for crafts. And that's something that I wanted guys to let you guys know. Now I'm going to go and talk about how all of this whole system relates to human trafficking and why it's important. So they kept suggesting that I talk to you guys about how they wanted me to have a pretty little attitude. And I don't want to go into that because that's something that I think if they're experts in pretty little attitudes, and I'll call it that, pretty little attitudes, this is what this video will be called, then that's something they should tell you about. I'm going to tell you about how this whole thing relates to human trafficking. It's the idea that as women, we can't talk about what's going on in our lives. We have to respond a certain way. We have to speak a certain way. But most of all, we have to keep proving ourselves. And I don't think men go do that. I don't think men are constantly required to prove themselves. I've never seen that. But I've seen it a lot with women, where we aren't accepted as we are, how we are, and everything we do gets placed under a microscope. So they said in a previous video, I said they magnified my body instead of magnetize my body. In a way, I mean it as magnified my body. And they said I do that a lot, like something can go wrong and I'll make it seem like a happy accident. But part of what I'm telling you about living my life that way is true. I do live my life that way, is because if you don't live your life that way, this is how these people will get you. Every little thing that you do wrong, mistakes, they'll turn into a big deal. I like to look at things like, well, you know what? It didn't work out that way, but it kind of worked out in a different way. And that's part of how I like to live my life. So in essence, that is who I am. Bad things happen to me all the time. They said, oh, you've been stood up. Yeah, I have been stood up. I even had something like that in a video, and I've said it in previous videos. I've been stood up. They said the guy from high school didn't really like me. Now they say he's gay. It's okay. And that's my point. I think that is why they keep saying, well, why do I always do well? That is the reason I always do well. Mistakes happen. I've made mistakes. Other people I know have made mistakes. But part of how these people work, and I think it goes back to pretty little attitude, is that if you make a mistake and they use it to bring you down, to break you, which is why I say, don't allow yourself to get too broken down. If you get too broken down, these people come right in. They can smell it. They can taste it. They can taste that brokenness. And they take advantage of that. And how that relates to human trafficking is that once you are vulnerable, they keep telling a story about how when I was on strike for a very short time, it was like hours at an old job in the 90s. I was sitting down with one of my coworkers and a man walked by and he said, do you need a place to stay? Are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine, And they keep talking about that. But that's what I mean. That moment when you're broken down is when they can feel that. It's like it's something they sense. And that goes back to what I'm saying. The idea that I would have to constantly prove myself, to have to constantly, if I make a mistake, feel bad about myself or get to a point where I'm uncertain of myself. I can't trust. That's it. I lose trust in myself. They would come right in. And that's what this whole situation was. They took that opportunity of me getting sick, trying to make me forgetful, mess up my, my head, literally and figuratively, mess with my head. I'm going to call it that too. Pretty little attitude to mess with your head. and used it to force me to feel like I had to be engaged in being human trafficked. So it stems from that. It stems from trying to make me prove every little thing, questioning me, constantly questioning me, constantly trying to degrade me. If I make a mistake, don't turn it into a positive. I think they always say that when you make a mistake, try to make a positive out of it. But I'm going to pause this because I don't want to speak like this. I'll be right back. So they always say, not the people talking. I'm talking about people who have common sense. If you make a mistake, make a positive out of it. Use it to your advantage. So when I do that, they look at it as a negative because they want me to feel bad about mistakes that I've made. But it's a positive. I think that is part of how this works. You know, when they're trying to manipulate me, they feel that the easiest way to manipulate me is to make me feel that I'm broken, undesirable, unlovable. The idea that they talked about the high school guy in that way is to make me feel unlovable, undesirable. But I think what happens in life, you know, is that the more mistakes you make, the better you kind of get at making mistakes, and the better you are at looking at it. Like, I survived that mistake, I'll survive this. I survived that, I'll survive this. So I think it becomes easier to make mistakes and survive them. And I think that is what the human traffickers don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that you can survive mistakes. And I said this in another video. I said trial and error. I said I've had more error than trial. And they finally understood what I meant. That I make a lot of mistakes, just like anyone else. But that doesn't stop me from getting back up, doing another video, telling you more about my life. Thank you for watching.